Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Labour have long been critical of Theresa May's plans for Brexit, but they've not quite spelled out an alternative until today. The shadow Brexit Secretary Keir Starmer gave a speech saying what his pitch to our EU counterparts would be. 5 key differences to note to the approach of Theresa May. 1, tone, more collaborative. 2, there would be a unilateral clarification of the rights of EU citizens to remain here. 3, under Labour, Britain would aim to remain in a number of EU institutions, Erasmus, Euratom, the European Medicines Agency and Europol, among others. And then, numbers 4 and 5, the option, I repeat, option to remain in the single market and the option to remain in the customs union.
Labour's white paper will have a strong emphasis on retaining the benefits of the single market and customs union, vital as they are to protecting our economy. Our paper will make crystal clear that jobs and the economy are Labour's priority throughout.
Now, does what he said really add up to a fundamentally different approach to Theresa May? On the single market, barely, because Labour concedes free movement has to go, so single market membership is unlikely to be on offer. But staying in the customs union is a possibility, one that might solve a pending problem of congestion at the port of Dover and reduce pressure for a border between the north and south in Ireland. Is this a clear, distinct plan, or is there still an element of fudge, though? We'll ask the shadow Brexit minister shortly, but first some political background. Labour's problem is that its supporters are divided on the EU. Chris Cook has been looking at new data from the British election study. It's a huge, reliable survey of public opinion, and he's found hints of what Brexit means for votes.
Labour's problem with losing supporters who backed Brexit has received a lot of attention, but there's a few important bits of arithmetic worth bearing in mind. Let's start, as most of these discussions do, in the north of England. It is true that across the north, most people voted Leave. It's also true that this is a place where Labour is the biggest party. But it doesn't follow that most Labour voters in the north also voted for Leave. In fact, for example, in the northeast, where only 42% of the public at large voted Remain, 61% of 2015 Labour voters did so. Nationally, 2 of every 3 voters who backed Labour in 2015 also backed Remain. That's not to say Labour doesn't have a problem in the north, though, particularly with that minority of its supporters who were pro-Brexit. Let's look at voters who backed Ed Miliband in 2015 and then voted Leave. Newly released British election study data from the tail end of last year shows only 46% of this group was still backing the party. 10% plan to vote for the Tories, 11% said they were heading for UKIP, and 26% said they didn't know. Other parties and non-voting took the rest. That is very worrisome for Labour because more recent polling moves have shown UKIP dropping while the Tories rise. Now, here are the constituencies currently held by Labour. Of these, there are 67 where Labour's lead over the Tories is smaller than the UKIP vote share. Not all of them are plausible Tory targets, but a Tory squeeze on those UKIP voters could be gruesome for Labour, and direct transfers from Labour Brexiters to the Tories will make that much, much worse. What then of those voters who backed Ed Miliband and then voted Remain? At the end of last year, Labour was doing better with them, holding on to 64% of those voters. Remember, though, that twice as many of Labour's 2015 supporters backed Remain as Leave. So, while Labour lost a larger share of its Leave voters, overall, it has lost more Labour Remainers. So, it's worth paying attention to them. Especially the 10% of Labour Remainers who, last year, had deserted Labour for the Liberal Democrats. The issue here isn't so much that the Lib Dems will take seats off Labour. This shift would only flip Cambridge. But that movement would be very significant in other races. On its own, it would be enough to move 13 Labour seats to the Tories. Jeremy Corbyn faces a uniquely difficult challenge, holding his party together. But remember, even in the Brexit backing north, losing Remainers will hurt.
Chris Cook there with some of the sort of political psephology of it all. But with me now is Paul Blomfield. He's the Shadow Minister for Brexit, Deputy to Keir Starmer. Very good evening to you. I'm saying, I think what we got today was clarity that you'd really like us to be in the customs union. Am I over-interpreting your position?
No, I don't think you are. I mean, I think what Keir set out today was a desire to have the best possible economic settlement, and negotiating a good deal within the framework of the customs union is an important part of that.
Crucially, he said, you know, he would put good deal with the EU above hypothetical deals with the US or India or all these other countries, which implies that he would be for customs union membership, because then you don't have the, you don't have any customs border, you don't have any tariffs, and that would be the logic of what he's saying, I think.
Well, it would be, because the EU accounts for about 44% of our exports, so it is important. And it's interesting the way that the Tories have focused on the United States, for example, trumpeting that deal, whereas the new administration in the States has said they're going to talk to the EU first.
Right. So you're willing to forego, if you like, because Liam Fox will tell you that he's got a Department of International Trade, he's scouting around and they're perhaps thinking about trade deals with lots of countries. You will say, look, forget all of that. It's the EU that we want. It's the EU that's most important.
The EU, first and foremost, is most important to our economy.
Why has it taken... Well, why was it not put more clearly? Why did Keir Starmer not just say... He couched it in terms of the option, he linked it with the single market. Why didn't he just say, look, the real substantive difference between Labour and Conservative approaches to this is, Labour, we want to be in the customs union. I tell you, that's going to be good for the car industry, that's what they want. We're going to be in the customs union. Why did he not say that? Is there always this sense of fudging it and not quite spelling it out?
Well, I'm sorry that you say that, Evan, because I think we've been fairly clear all along. We've said very differently from the Tories that what comes first is jobs and the economy and people's livelihoods. And at the earlier stages of some of the debates we've had in the House, we've talked about membership of the customs union as an important part of that.
But it did feel like today we got clarity, and yet it felt like, or Keir Starmer gave the impression he was giving us something new today. I think he was giving us something new today, wasn't he?
I think he was pulling together our message in a way which is reaching out more effectively, and as you described it in the opening to the programme.
But, I mean, if he's... Lots of people have not understood it. Little of the write-up is Labour's for the customs union. We're going to be in the customs union if you vote Labour. And yet that is a serious difference to the Conservatives.
Well, it is a serious difference, but also I think we should be focusing on the outputs and not the mechanisms, in a sense. And that's what we've been saying all along, that it's about getting the best possible deal for the economy. Now, you'll say the Tories were saying that too, but we're saying that comes first in the negotiations. And if the way to achieve that is through membership of the customs union and proper negotiations around that, as opposed to the cavalier way in which the Tories have just brushed it off the table.
Of course, the issue that you have also today clarified or specified a policy on is free movement will end, correct?
Yes, because...
a tiny bit hesitant, if I may say.
No, because I'm always sorry that so many of these complex issues are seen in very binary terms. The truth is that when we leave the European Union, our whole migration policy will have to be revisited. And that means starting afresh, not only in terms of EU migration, but non-EU migration as well, because if we don't, the economy will crash very quickly.
And so do you have in mind an immigration policy to replace free movement in respect to EU citizens, or is that, if you like, something to worry about a bit later on?
That's something to look at further down the road.
Yeah. Single market, what's the point in saying you'd like... You keep the option of the single market open? You know that's not going to be on offer if you pull back from free movement as you have today.
Well, we want the best possible relationship with the single market because that's so important to our economy. And I think that what distinguishes our position is that not only, as you said earlier on is it's seeking a more collaborative relationship with the European Union. But we're not getting into painting ourselves into corners now by knocking things off the table. And that's what the Tories are doing, and it's a big mistake.
And a quick last one. The European Court of Justice, that's one of Theresa May's red lines. She doesn't want anything that would leave us in that. You're very comfortable with the European Court of Justice, in certain respects, having say over the British. I mean, for example, as a member of Euratom, we would be subject to the European Court of Justice, and you're completely comfortable with that.
We would, and that's caused us absolutely no problems in relation to Euratom. But what needs to be understood, and the Tories are being very dishonest with the British people, is there is no international trade deal you can do with any country in the world which does not have a dispute resolution system. And the nature of those systems in every treaty is that they will sit above British courts and the British Parliament. So if you want no trade deals with anybody, you have sovereignty. Right. Otherwise, you cede some sovereignty when you reach international agreements.
Paul Bromfield, thank you very much indeed. Thanks.